What if a road was more than a path on the map? What if it was a thread of memory, weaving together deserts, mountains, and people who would never meet, but still shared the same stars? The Silk Road was such a thread, quiet, steady, and patient. It carried not only silk and spices, but footsteps, stories, and dreams that traveled farther than any caravan. Tonight, we'll walk that road together, not in haste, not in noise, but in the slow rhythm of camels, the hush of mountain winds, and the soft murmur of markets at dusk. Let the bells of the caravan and the glow of the fire guide you gently toward rest. And before we begin, a small invitation. If these quiet journeys through history help you find peace, please subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. It lets the algorithm know you'd like more nights like this, and it helps keep this road open for all who seek a gentler way to fall asleep. Now, breathe deeply, set your thoughts down like burdens at the gate, and join the caravan. The Silk Road is waiting, and it moves at the pace of dreams. If you close your eyes and imagine a road without pavement, without posts, without maps, yet known for centuries, you will see the Silk Road not as a single path, but as a slow breath stretching across the earth. It begins in whispers, in the dust stirred by hooves and sandals, in the long line of shadows that stretch further than the eye can comfortably follow. There are no milestones carved in stone, no clocks ticking in towers, only the sound of animals, shifting weight, and the murmur of wind across dunes. To walk or ride along this ancient highway was to measure time not by hours, but by horizons. The desert, wide as silence itself, spreads in every direction. Its surface looks still, but under the sun's patient gaze, grains of sand drift like thoughts too quiet to be spoken. A caravan moves slowly, a ribbon of movement on a land that does not change quickly. Camels, their long necks swinging in rhythm, are both beasts and companions, creatures built to carry water in patience and burdens without complaint. Their padded feet press softly into the sand, making almost no noise, as though respecting the desert's dignity. Bells tied to their saddles chime faintly, a fragile music that drifts far before dissolving in the air. Each step is measured, each pause deliberate. Men and women wrapped in layers of cloth walk beside the animals, sandals whispering against sand and stone. Their faces are shaded, but not hidden. Eyes squint against light that is more ancient than their names. On the backs of the camels are bundles, rolls of silk wrapped tightly against dust, jars sealed with wax, bags of spice that release faint scents when the wind is curious: cinnamon, pepper, saffron. A caravan is a moving market, carrying the memory of one place into the silence of another. The sun does not hurry. It climbs, lingers, and descends with a grace that has seen countless caravans before and will see countless more after. Midday is stillness, but travelers pause in the narrow shade of cliffs, tents, or their own cloaks stretched wide. Fires are rare at noon, for heat has already done the cooking. Instead, small rations of dried fruit, hard bread, and water are shared, eaten quietly. Camels kneel, folding their legs as if in prayer, chewing with the patience of monks. The desert hums with insects, with wind, with the endless ticking of sand shifting from one slope to another. Evenings are kinder. When the sun withdraws its fire, the horizon softens into shades of rose and gold. Shadows lengthen, then merge, until the caravan is no longer a line of bodies but a single dark brushstroke across fading light. The air cools, and breathing becomes easier, like a sigh released after a long day. Fires are lit, small, respectful flames coaxed from twigs gathered along the way. Pots bubble with rice, lentils, or broth flavored with dried herbs. The smell rises gently into the dark. Around the fire, voices are low, sharing stories that do not need to be remembered tomorrow, but feel warm tonight. At night, the sky becomes a map. Stars wheel into place, steady, familiar, and vast. The North Star points like a compass, and constellations arrange themselves as guides. The curve of the Great Bear, the belt of Orion, the endless river of the Milky Way. These are companions, older than camels, teachers of direction and patience. Travelers lie back on woven mats, gazing upward, tracing routes with fingers in the air. Children, lulled by stories of dragons and heroes written in the stars, drift to sleep while elders keep watch. In the silence between heartbeats, the desert feels less empty and more like a temple roofed by infinity. The caravan sleeps in shifts. Some watch, listening for the cry of a fox, the hiss of wind, or the unlikely approach of strangers. Most rest wrapped in blankets that carry the scent of dust and smoke. Camels fold themselves into the earth, grumbling softly as though telling dreams. Lamps flicker once and surrender to darkness. Only the embers glow, and above them, the stars do not blink. Sleep comes not quickly but gradually, like sand settling after wind. Morning arrives without alarm. The dawn blushes over the edge of dunes, coloring the world in pale pinks and soft golds. The air is cool and breaths mist briefly before the sun remembers its strength. Fires are coaxed back to life, bread warmed on hot stones, tea brewed with herbs carried carefully in pouches. The caravan rises slowly, camels shaken awake, loads secured, ropes tied with knots checked twice. There is no rush, for rushing in the desert is foolish. The day's journey begins again with the rhythm of hooves, the sigh of sand, and the fragile bells. In this slow pattern walk hose, each sleep, wake the silk road breeze. It is not an invention of rulers or merchants alone, it is a partnership between people and land, between patience and necessity. Caravans move not because of ambition alone, but because stillness, too, has a rhythm that calls for company. Every dune crossed, every night slept beneath the stars, every bundle of silk that survives the desert's test is a thread woven into a greater fabric. The desert does not tell secrets quickly. It teaches instead. It teaches that distance is not an enemy, only a measure. It teaches that silence is not emptiness, only space for listening. It teaches that wealth is not only gold or silk, but a drink of cool water, a patch of shade, a star that keeps its promise to shine in the same place each night. Those who walk the Silk Road learn that survival is not about conquering the desert, but about keeping step with its patient, endless song. And so the caravans move soft, slow, unhurried, leaving behind no monuments, but the memory of their quiet persistence. They cross not to shout at history, but to whisper into it, footsteps pressed gently into sand that forgets quickly but teaches deeply. The Silk Road is not a paved highway. It is a conversation between people and the earth. In the desert, this conversation is hushed, stretched over days that repeat like verses of a slow hymn. To travel across dunes is to surrender to their patience, to walk with a rhythm as old as wind, to measure progress not in hours, but in how the sky has changed since the last pause. The dunes themselves are alive in their stillness. In the morning, they wear soft gold, edges sharp as if drawn by a careful hand. At noon, they whiten under the sun, dazzling the eyes until sky and sand melt together. At dusk, they glow red and purple, each ridge throwing shadows long enough to suggest mountains. At night, they are nothing but shapes beneath the stars, soft curves that cradle silence. Caravans cross them not with speed but with reverence, leaving footprints that are erased before another dawn. The caravan's rhythm is steady. Camels kneel, loads are tied. Bolts of silk wrapped in oiled cloth, bags of spices, pepper, cloves, nutmeg that smell faintly of distant markets, jars of glass packed in straw, small blocks of jade. Men tighten their belts, adjust headcloths against glare, lift staffs polished smooth by years of leaning. The caravan rises like a slow animal stretching after sleep. Then comes the sound, bells jingling softly from camels' necks, sandals crunching sand, the low rumble of beasts, a child's laugh quickly hushed, step after step, mile after mile. The desert teaches everyone to be quiet. Midday rest is sacred. To march in full sun is to invite exhaustion. Instead, The caravan halts in shallow hollows or beneath cliffs where shadows collect. A mat is spread, not grand but sufficient. Food is modest, flatbread warmed on a hot stone, dried apricots chewy with concentrated sweetness, a handful of nuts, sometimes dried meat salted, until it tastes of both earth and sea. Water skins are opened sparingly, each swallow deliberate, each cup passed to another hand with respect. Conversation is brief, news of a village 2 days behind, a reminder of the next well. A proverb repeated as if it were water itself. The desert is wide, but so is patience. When the afternoon march resumes, the horizon does not change quickly. Sky remains sky, sand remains sand. Yet to a practiced eye signs appear, the slope of dunes, the direction of ripples etched by wind, the faint track of wheels from a caravan that passed weeks ago. The dry stem of a desert plant pointing toward hidden moisture. Navigation is an art of attention. The leader of the caravan, staff in hand, studies stars by night and shadows by day, learning from both. He remembers landmarks invisible to strangers, a lone black rock shaped like a crouching lion, stretch of sand where the ground rings hollow, the angle of cliffs where falcons nest. These are not written on maps. They are kept in memory and passed down in whispers at campfires. Evening is the reward. As the sun descends, heat loosens its grip and the desert breathes more gently. Fires are lit with twigs gathered in secret caches near wells and oases. Cooking pots bubble with lentils, rice, or stew flavored with dried herbs. The smell drifts, comforting and faint, over sand that remembers every fire before it. On the flames, travelers eat slowly, tearing bread into pieces, dipping it into bowls, drinking tea brewed strong to wake the spirit for one more watch. Voices are low, stories unhurried. Tales of merchants who grew rich, of storms survived, of wells found just as thirst was sharpening. Children listen until their heads nod. Elders smile at the rhythm of repetition. Then night reveals its ceiling. Stars pour across the sky, countless and unwavering. The North Star holds its post. The constellations rise in their order, carrying time on their shoulders. Travelers lie back on mats, pointing with fingers. There is Orion's belt, marking south. There is the Milky Way, a river we can follow even when no river flows beneath us. The desert, which in day seems empty, at night is crowded with stars, with silence, with dreams. Camels, tethered loosely, chew thoughtfully, their large eyes reflecting starlight as if they too are reading the sky. Sleep comes in layers. The youngest fall first, curled beside parents, soothed by the lone murmur of voices. Adults sleep in shifts, some watching, some resting. Guards walk the perimeter slowly, their staffs marking soft patterns in the sand. A breeze slips through the camp, stirring embers, rattling tent cloth, whispering through ropes. The desert does not sleep, but it allows people to. The silence is not empty, it is full of patience. Like a long breath held until morning. Dawn arrives gently. The horizon glows pale pink, then deepens to gold. A cock crow is rare, but birds hidden among scrub sometimes greet the light. Camels groan and rise awkwardly, shaking dust from their coats. Travelers stretch, wash their faces with a handful of water, fold mats, tie bundles. Fires are coaxed into life again for warm bread and tea. There is no alarm, no rush. The desert dictates its own clock. When the sun's rim clears the horizon, the caravan sets off once more, step after step, toward the next well, the next shadow, the next memory in the endless song of sand. Days repeat, step, rest, each sleep, and yet, within repetition, there is a deep peace. The desert does not change quickly, and so the heart slows, learns patience, measures wealth not by possessions but by endurance, not by speed but by steadiness. On the Silk Road, in the long patience of dunes, travelers discovered that survival was not a battle but a conversation, one spoken softly, with respect, in the universal language of silence. If the desert is a vast silence, Then the wells and oases are its softest words. Without them, caravans would be dreams dissolved in heat. With them, the desert becomes a patient teacher, offering rest at carefully chosen intervals. On the Silk Road, these points of water were not only necessities, they were milestones, chapters in a story written across sand and stone. A well is never just a hole in the ground. It is a covenant between land and people, dug deep into the earth lined with stone that remembers hands, covered with wooden beams or woven mats. It waits in quiet for the next thirsty traveler. Approaching a well is a ritual of patience. The caravan slows. Camels scent the moisture before human eyes can spot the dark patch of reeds or the telltale cluster of palms. The leader raises a hand, the long line halts. Sand whispers under hooves. As beasts kneel, knowing what comes next, men unwind ropes, lower buckets that creak as they descend into darkness. The splash below is the sweetest music in the desert, a note that brings laughter even from weary throats. The drawing of water is never careless. Each skin or jar filled is a blessing counted aloud. First, the camels drink, their long mouths pulling at the buckets, eyes closing in satisfaction. Then the people sip, not in gulps, but in deliberate swallows, each drop rolled on the tongue as if it were honey. Children laugh, splashing hands over faces. Breaking the desert's solemn mask with joy, women rinse cloth, wringing it gently, the water falling back into sand like borrowed coins returned. Men refill skins, knotting them carefully, placing them in shaded baskets. The well, once patient, is patient again, waiting for the next line of strangers. An oasis is more than water. It is life shaped into a resting place. Palms rise tall, their fronds whispering against one another. Pools reflect the sky, rippling. When birds arrive to drink, on the edges, green bursts forth, reeds, grasses, herbs, patches of cultivated land where figs and dates swell under tender care. Huts or tents often cluster nearby, forming small communities whose survival is tied to the well. These people are hosts and traders both, offering shade and bread in exchange for silk, spice, or news of distant lands. Their children watch caravans arrive with wide eyes, curious about worlds their parents describe but never see. For the traveler, reaching an oasis feels like waking from a long dream. Heat yields to shade, silence to voices, dust to fragrance. Fires are lit without fear of wasting wood. Meals grow richer. Rice boiled with dates, bread baked with oil, sometimes meat roasted over glowing embers. Camels roll onto their sides, legs stretched, sighing in contentment. Packs are opened, checked, repacked. Cloth bundles loosened, jars inspected, ropes repaired. Merchants unfurl bolts of silk, letting colors shine in the light. Reds like sunset, blues like river water, gold threads that catch the fire's glow. Local traders examine them, barter with calm words, place spices and salt in baskets as fair exchange. Deals are not rushed. In the desert, even commerce respects silence. At night, oases become lanterns of life in a dark ocean. Fires ring the pool, their light flickering on water and palm trunks. Shadows of camels stretch long, then vanish into darkness. Around the flames, voices rise and sung, simple, repetitive, the kind that soothe rather than excite. A boy plucks a string instrument, its notes carrying softly across reeds. Elders tell stories of storms survived, of caravans lost and found, of ancestors who discovered this well when all seemed hopeless. Children listen with eyes wide, drifting into dreams before endings are spoken. Stars above nod in agreement, their reflections trembling in the pool below. Yet an oasis is not only comfort, it is memory. Caravans mark their routes not by maps, but by these points of water. Wells are given names, stories, personalities. The well of the black stone, the pool of the three palms, the place where the camel knelt on its own. To know the Silk Road is to know these markers, to carry them in memory as carefully as water skins. They are waypoints in both geography and story. A traveler lost in dunes prays not for rescue but for the sight of a single palm on the horizon. To find one is to be forgiven. The desert teaches fairness at wells. Water is shared. No traveler may hoard. No beast may be ignored. To steal from a well is to steal from life itself. Laws are spoken softly but enforced strongly. A man who refuses to share is remembered for generations. His name a warning whispered in caravans. A family who built a well and kept it for all is remembered as kin even by strangers. The desert has no patience for greed. It survives only by generosity measured drop by drop. When the caravan departs an oasis, the silence feels heavier for a moment. The pool, the palms, the laughter fade behind, swallowed by sand, yet the memory of cool water remains in mouths and hearts, a promise carried forward. Camels walk more willingly, their burdens lighter in spirit. Children cling to scraps of reed or palm leaf as treasures. Adults adjust their ropes, lift their staffs, and step into the endless dunes once more. Ahead lies distance, heat, silence, but also the next well, the next pool, the next reprieve written into the desert's long patience. The Silk Road is not one straight path, it is a string of pearls. Each well and oasis a bead that holds together the fragile thread of survival. Between them lies emptiness, but within them lies abundance. Water, shade, food, rest, story, and trade. To walk the road is to move from pearl to pearl, from silence to speech, from thirst to gratitude. And so the desert, which seems at first merciless, reveals itself to be generous if approached with humility. It will not give everything at once. It will not forgive arrogance, but to those who walk steadily, who share water, who remember wells, it opens slowly, offering life in places where none should exist. The Silk Road lives not in the sand itself, but in these resting points where footsteps, stories, and survival meet. When a caravan at last leaves behind the silence of dunes and the hush of mountain passes, it approaches a different kind of quiet, the quiet hum of markets, where voices mingle not to shout but to weave a low tapestry of trade. The Silk Road was not only a path across deserts, it was also a chain of towns and cities where caravans rested, exchanged, and where the air carried not just dust but the fragrance of distant worlds. Imagine approaching one of these crossroads. After weeks of sand and sky, the first sight is a city wall, not grand like the walls of empires, but sufficient, shaped of mud, brick, or stone, with a gate wide enough for camels to stoop through. Guards nod as the caravan files past, their spears upright, their eyes watchful but not unfriendly. Beyond the gate lies the bazaar, the heart of the Silk Road's exchange. Here, the silence of the desert loosens, replaced by a murmur like flowing water, not loud, not hurried, simply constant. The bazaar streets wind beneath awnings of cloth stretched to shade the traders and their goods. Dust lies thick, but feet stir it into fragrance as they pass. Cinnamon from the south, cloves sharp and bright, nutmeg warm and earthy, pepper biting the nose. The air is full of smells, each telling of places far beyond the horizon. Spices are piled in baskets, red, yellow, brown, each mound a mountain of another land. On other stalls lie bolts of silk, smooth as water, glowing with colors the desert never grows. Deep crimson, sea blue, jade green, threads of gold that catch the sun even in shadow. Traders run their hands along the cloth, eyes half closed, as if the feel alone could bring them closer to distant gardens of mulberry and rooms where cocoons once whispered beside them. Merchants from the west offer glassware, cups, and beads that sparkle like frozen water packed carefully in straw and ash for the long journey. From other tables come porcelain bowls, white as clouds, painted with blue patterns that remind the viewer of waves or vines. Each object is both ordinary and extraordinary, a cup to drink from, a bowl for rice, and yet also a piece of another world in one's hand. Traders themselves form the true market. Men in robes of different cut and color, turbans of varied wrap, women with veils or without, children weaving between legs, laughter darting through. Languages overlap, Persian soft and flowing, Chinese clipped and careful, Arabic measured and musical, Turkic sharp with consonants. Few understand all, yet trade happens because hands and eyes learn to speak as well. A bolt of silk is lifted, a jar of pepper weighed, fingers trace numbers in the dust, heads nod. No shouting is needed. Agreement is found in the quiet curve of palms dotting corners of the market. Scribes sit ready, with reed pens and small tablets. They record exchanges, write contracts, witness deals. For those who cannot read, they speak the words aloud before drying ink makes them permanent. Trust is important, but so is memory. Paper holds what voices might forget. Nearby, money changers handle coins from countless lands. Roman denarii, Chinese bronze cash, Indian silver, Persian drachmae. Scales tip gently as weights balance. The soft clink of metal weaving into the hum. Markets are not only for goods, they are for stories. A merchant from Samarkand speaks of a storm that closed a pass for months. A traveler from Chang'an describes a festival with lanterns bright as stars. A caravan guard tells of bandits scattered by the sight of torches, arranged to mimic a larger army. These stories, shared in low voices over cups of tea, travel as surely as silk or spice. News becomes another commodity, traded and carried onward. Food stalls line the edges of the market, where hungry travelers find rest. Smoke curls from skewers of lamb roasting slowly, seasoned with salt and herbs. Pots bubble with rice, lentils, and stews flavored by spices from far away. The scent is a reminder that food itself is a form of trade. The cumin may have crossed from one empire, the rice from another, the salt from yet another sea. To eat here is to taste the road itself. As the sun lowers, the market does not empty, it simply softens. Lamps are lit, hanging from ropes or set on wooden stands. Their glow makes silk shimmer. Glass glow, spice mounds deepen in color. Music drifts in, perhaps a flute, perhaps a drum played with soft fingers. Children curl against parents. Traders sip the last tea of the day. Guards lean on spears with shoulders relaxing. The market exhales, settling into evening like a caravan folding for the night. The crossroads city does not boast. It is not an empire's capital, not a palace of kings, but it is here in these modest streets that the Silk Road truly lived. Goods moved, yes, but so did stories, skills, recipes, songs, and names. The bazaar was a heartbeat in the long body of the road, steady and essential. Without it, caravans would carry goods into silence. With it, they carried life from one horizon to another. If the desert was a silence broken only by the soft bells of camels, then the markets of the Silk Road were a different kind of silence, a low murmur, steady and constant, never hurried, never loud. To walk through a bazaar at the crossroads of empires was to enter a tapestry woven not of threads, but of scents, colors, textures, and voices. Here, the road became visible not as dust and horizon, but as baskets of spice, bolts of silk, and the hands of strangers clasped in quiet agreement. Imagine stepping beneath the stretched awnings that shade the market streets. Sunlight filters through woven cloth, softened into stripes of gold and shadow. Dust rises with every footfall, and instead of vanishing into the air, it mingles with fragrance. The first breath carries cinnamon, sweet and sharp; the second, pepper, biting at the nose; the third, saffron, a whisper of flowers and sunlight preserved in threads finer than hair. In one corner, cloves lie in dark mounds, pungent and rich. Nearby, ginger sits in knotted roots, its scent warm and earthy. To walk a dozen steps is to walk a dozen landscapes, each basket a geography of its own. But spices are not the only treasures. Rolls of silk, unfurled and shaken gently, gleam like rivers caught in mid-motion. The cloth moves with a grace that makes even the air pay attention. Red bolts glow like embers at dusk. Blue shines like morning sky over mountains. Green rests as quietly as palm fronds beside an oasis. Traders run fingers along them, testing weight, admiring sheen. A single length of silk can travel from a cocoon farm in China, through mountains, across deserts, and into the hands of a noble in Rome, gathering stories in its threads the way it gathers dust along the way, across the aisle. Ceramics and glass sparkle like frozen water. Porcelain bowls painted with blue vines sit beside cups of pale jade. Glass beads, translucent as drops of rain, catch the lamplight and scatter like stars. Some are threaded into necklaces, some wait in small bags ready to be carried onward. Their fragility makes them precious, and yet here they lie in open stalls, trusted to survive among strangers. A merchant demonstrates by tapping one gently. The clear ringing note silences the nearby murmur for a moment, then folds back into it. The traders themselves are as varied as their wares. Robes of different weave and cut mingle in the crowd. Persian merchants in patterned tunics, Chinese traders in long silk coats, Central Asian horsemen in fur-trimmed cloaks, Arab traders with headcloths bound against dust. Their languages overlap, threads of sound weaving into a fabric of mutual understanding. Where words fail, hands step and fingers trace numbers in the dust, palms open to show honesty, coins and goods exchanged with nods. Trust here is not given easily, but it is built with every fair measure, every honest scale, every promise kept. Across miles beside the stalls sit the scribes, bent over tablets and scrolls. With reed pens dipped in ink, they record contracts, witness exchanges, tally goods. They are the memory of the market, ensuring that promises outlast the voices that made them. A contract might state, 1 bolt of silk, deep red, exchanged for 20 measures of pepper and 5 coins of silver, witnessed by 2 men of good standing. The ink dries, and the deal becomes part of the market's heartbeat. For many who cannot read, the scribe is both voice and ear, making sure fairness is not lost in the rush of trade. And then there are the money changers, whose tables glint with coins from every corner of the known world, round bronze coins with square holes from China, stamped silver drachmae from Persia, gold solidi from Byzantium, copper denarii still bearing faint Roman facings. Weights are placed carefully, balances checked, conversions whispered. A coin is not only metal, it is a piece of history, a token of the road's length. To watch the scales tip is to watch trust take shape in brass and silver. But a market is not only business, it is storytelling, disguised as small talk. A trader from Kashgar speaks of a storm in the mountains that turned snow to stone. A man from Baghdad tells of a caliph who filled his garden with nightingales. A merchant from India described ships with sails dyed red carrying pepper across seas so vast the stars themselves are used as ropes. Each tale is listened to, retold, reshaped, carried onward. Like silk, like spice. Stories travel further than any single caravan. Food stalls add their own chorus. Smoke curls from skewers of lamb turning slowly, fat dripping onto embers with a hiss. Pots of rice flavored with cumin bubble gently, sending their aroma into the crowd. Flatbreads puff and crackle on hot stones torn and dipped into bowls of lentils spiced with garlic and onion. Sweet treats appear too, dates stuffed with nuts, honey poured over sesame seeds, tea brewed strong with mint leaves. To eat in such a place is not simply to fill the stomach but to taste the road itself, the spice of India, the grain of the Fertile Crescent, the fruit of Central Asia, all meeting in a single bowl. As the day passes, the market shifts in mood. Morning is brisk, deals made with fresh minds. Midday is slow, traders resting in the shade, sipping tea, conversations drifting. Evening is tender, lamps lit, soap glowing, spices deepening in shadow, glassware reflecting tiny stars. Music joins the soft beat of a drum, the sigh of a flute, voices singing in a language no one needs to translate because its meaning is simple. Togetherness. Children drift to sleep on their mothers' laps, heads resting against bundles of silk. Elders lean back against walls, watching the crowd with eyes that have seen 100 markets and still find them beautiful. In this low murmur, this rhythm, Of bargaining and sharing, the Silk Road reveals its truest face. It is not in the deserts alone, not in the mountains or the passes. It is here in the slow exchange of goods and stories, in the trust of strangers, in the smell of spice carried by a desert wind, that the road becomes more than geography. It becomes a bridge of patience, connecting people who may never see each other again, but who leave behind a piece of themselves in the bargain. The market is not loud, not hurried. It is as steady as footsteps in sand, as enduring as stars above the desert. And when the lamps are finally extinguished, and the stalls packed away, the murmur does not end. It travels with the caravans, folded into bolts of silk, sealed into jars of spice, carried in the hearts of those who will tell of it at the next oasis, the next city, the next quiet market under another sky. By the time the sun lowers itself behind the mud-brick walls of a crossroads town, the market is no longer a rush of trade but a slow exhale. The air cools. The dust that floated all afternoon settles gently. Lamps are lit one by one, their flames small. Amber eyes watching over the bazaar. With their light, the stalls transform. Silk shimmers more richly in the soft glow, spices deepen in hue, glass cups and beads sparkle like captive stars. The bazaar, once bustling, now hums like a lullaby. Traders settle into the rhythm of closing. Goods are not packed in haste. Each bolt of silk is folded with care, smooth as though preparing it for another long journey. Spice baskets are covered with cloth, tied down so their perfume remains only a whisper for the night. Jars of oil are checked for cracks. Porcelain is wrapped in straw. Glass beads are gathered and tucked into leather pouches that clink softly when tied. A stall is never left untidy, for neatness is a kind of gratitude to the goods, to the customers, to the day itself. Beside the stalls, scribes unroll their ledgers, reading back what was written in the heat of morning. Contracts are checked. Who promised what? Who received which goods? Who still owes coin at dawn? Ink, dry and permanent, is the final judge. A small lamp rests beside them, the flame steady while the reed pen scratches one last line. These documents will travel too, folded into bundles, carried by couriers, stored in archives that may outlast the very walls around them. Writing is the caravan of memory, and tonight it walks at the slow pace of drying ink. Nearby, money changers finish their balances. Scales tilt back and forth under the dim light, coins clinking as they are sorted by origin. Bronze with square holes from the East, silver drachmae from Persia, gold coins bearing emperors' profiles. Each is stacked, each weighed, each noted. The scales creak quietly, then fall still, their work done until dawn. For the money changer, every coin is more than metal. It is a visitor that has traveled further than most men ever will. In the glow of the lamps, these small circles of history rest like suns in miniature. As the market closes, the food stalls remain open, their warmth a beacon for the tired. Smoke drifts up from skewers, still turning slowly, lamb-browned and fragrant. Bread is pulled from hot stones, puff and crackling, torn into pieces and passed from hand to hand. Bowls of lentils, rich with garlic and onion, are ladled generously. Tea boils in copper pots, leaves and mint releasing scent that cuts through the night air. Here, trade becomes fellowship. Merchants who bargained fiercely by day now sit shoulder to shoulder, dipping bread into the same bowl, their laughter low and content. Music lingers too. A flute sings, weaving a line of notes that drifts upward like smoke. A drum keeps a heartbeat pace, soft enough to calm but steady enough to remind the crowd that the night is alive. A singer, perhaps a boy with a clear voice, threads words through the melody, simple lines about journeys, about rivers, about waiting for dawn. People listen without comment, rocking slightly, some humming along in languages that differ but meanings that converge. The music does not demand attention. It is simply there, like stars above or sand underfoot. Children, who all day ran between stalls, now slow. One curls against his mother's lap, clutching a bead-like treasure. Another leans against a rolled bolt of cloth, eyes closing as though silk itself were a pillow. A girl falls asleep with a half-eaten date in her hand, fingers sticky but soft. Parents smile, cover them with cloaks, and keep speaking in low voices, letting the children sleep inside the market's embrace. Stories continue, though not as loudly as in daylight. A merchant tells of a storm in the mountains that buried a caravan for weeks. Another recalls the taste of pomegranates from a distant valley, sweeter than any here. Someone shares a proverb: the road is long, but patience is longer. Heads nod, laughter comes in bursts, not sharp, but warm, like sparks rising from embers. These stories are traded as much as silk or spice. They leave no ledger mark, yet they are remembered. As night deepens, the bazaar exhales fully. Lamps burn lower, stalls are shut. Guards walk slowly through, spears tapping softly on stone. Dogs curl against doorways, tails twitching in sleep. The hum of voices fades to a murmur, then to a hush. Only the occasional creak of a cartwheel or the low rumble of a camel reminds the ear that life continues. Above, stars return, visible, even from within walls. They shine down as they do in the desert, impartial and endless. Watching the market rest up to sleep in such a place is different from sleep in the dunes. In the desert, silence is wide, patient, empty yet full. In the market, silence is close, shared, crowded with the memory of voices, of deals struck, of laughter softened by lamps. Both kinds of silence are the Silk Road's gift. Both teach the same lesson, that life moves not by rushing but by steady rhythm, whether in footsteps across sand or in whispers across a stall. When dawn comes, the market will stir again. Awnings will rise, baskets uncovered, silk shaken into light. Spices breathing fragrance once more. But for now the night holds it gently, like a merchant's careful hands holding porcelain. Not too tight, not too loose, just enough to keep it safe until morning. When the desert finally softens into foothills, the Silk Road takes on a new character. The endless horizons shrink, and in their place rise the mountains' walls of earth and stone carved by time, watched over by peaks that seem too tall for travelers to challenge. To walk here is to trade the patience of dunes for the patience of rock. A patience measured not in shifting sand but in cliffs that have stood for ages without moving a hand's breadth. The path through the mountains is narrow, often no wider than the body of a camel, hugging cliffs on one side and dropping sharply on the other. The sound of bells, soft in the desert, now echoes against stone, multiplying into layers of music. Each step is cautious, the rhythm slower. Hooves scrape against rock. Sandals crunch against gravel. Dust rises, but instead of vanishing into sky, it clings to stone walls and lingers like memory. Caravans move in single file, the line bending like a ribbon wound around the mountain's waist. Men walk with staffs, steadying themselves on slopes where loose stones shift underfoot. Camels climb steadily, their bodies made for endurance. Their eyes calm even when the path leans toward the void. Packs sway gently. Bolts of silk, jars of glass, baskets of spice, precious jade and ivory, all trusting the mountain not to shake. Traders whisper to animals, patting their sides as if to remind them that patience is enough. At pauses, the wind grows strong. It whistles through cracks in the cliffs, carrying voices far. Travelers wrap cloaks tighter, faces hidden against the sting of dust. Yet in the wind is also freshness, the scent of pine, of snow waiting higher up, of water tumbling in streams. Unseen, the desert's dryness is behind here. The mountain keeps its own store of life, hidden in caves, dripping from stone, singing in rivulets that carve paths of their own. Every few miles, carved into the cliffs, stand the remains of forts, built from the same stone as the mountain. They seem less like buildings and more like outcroppings. Their walls, though weathered, stand upright, watchful. These were places of rest, of protection, of authority. Soldiers once paced their battlements, eyes scanning the narrow roads below for bandits or armies. Caravans would halt near them, welcomed or inspected, paying small fees to pass safely. At night, their torches would burn against the black sky, guiding travelers like stars fixed to earth, even now when many are abandoned. Their shadows stretch across the road as if they still remember their duty. Life in the mountains has its own rhythm. Villages cling to terraces carved into slopes, their houses stacked like steps. Smoke curls from small chimneys, goats bleat from pens. Children run along narrow paths with balance learned young. For them, the caravan is not exotic but ordinary, a procession that has passed for generations, bringing silk and stories, leaving behind coin and rumor. A bull might sell a flask of water drawn from a spring, a woman a basket of dried fruit or cheese, a man a donkey for the next stage of the climb. In return, they hear news of empires they will never see, of seas wider than their valleys, of rulers whose names sound like songs. At night, camps are set along ledges where space permits. Fires flicker against stone, their smoke trailing upward into the stars. The sound is different here, not the whisper of sand, but the low groan of wind pushing through rocks, the call of owls, the bark of foxes hidden among cliffs. Camels chew slowly, their shadows large and strange against jagged walls. Merchants sit close, voices hushed, for sound carries too easily. Guards keep watch at both ends of the path, staffs in hand, listening for stones disturbed by steps that should not be there. Safety in the mountains is not assumed, it is earned with vigilance. Yet the mountains also give gifts. Streams trickle across paths, their water cool and sweet. Snow gleams on distant peaks, catching sunlight long after valleys fall into shadow. In spring, wildflowers burst from cracks, their colors surprising after months of brown and gold. The road may be narrow, but the view is endless. Valleys spread like open hands, ridges march into distance, clouds brush against peaks as if pausing to rest. To travel here is to feel small, but not forgotten. The mountain allows passage, and in return expects respect. As sleep comes, travelers wrap themselves in cloaks and lean against stones that still hold the day's warmth. Fires sink to embers. Stars prick the sky with cold light. The cliffs rise above like guardians, silent, unmoving, yet not hostile. They are indifferent perhaps, but indifference has its own kindness. It gives space for survival, for dreams, for the memory of footsteps echoing softly against rock. The Silk Road through the mountains was never easy, but it was enduring. Like the caravans themselves, the mountains asked for no speed, only patience. And so, step by step, load by load, story by story, the road bent and climbed, turning silence into passage, and passage into memory. In the mountains, safety does not shout. It stands quietly with its back against the cliff, a low wall here, a watchtower there, a gate of dark wood set into stone that remembers snow. The forts along the high routes of the Silk Road were never meant to dazzle, they were meant to endure. Their strength was patience. Walls thick enough to ignore wind, courtyards small enough to warm quickly in sun. Towers placed where eyes could travel farther than feet. To pass beneath their gates was to feel the road narrow into attentiveness, then widen again into relief. From a distance, a fort looks like the mountain practicing architecture. Stone rises from stone, battlements repeat the crooked line of the ridge. The gate sits in shadow where the path bends and slows. A watchman leans on a parapet, cloak pulled tight against a wind that files all edges smooth. He knows the path's grammar, where it curls around a boulder, where it stutters over scree, where a hoof might hesitate. When the caravan appears first, a bell echoed twice by rock, then the small procession itself. The watchman taps the rail, and a door opens below with the sound of wood remembering responsibility. Inside, the air changes. The courtyard collects sun like a bowl collects water. Smoke rises from a low kitchen. A copper pot mutters on a brazier. The smell is simple and generous: broth, bread, a leaf of mountain herb bruised between fingers. Animals learn the fort's manners quickly. Camels kneel along the leeward wall, mules share nosebags, horses stamp, and then accept the stillness. A scribe sits at a small table near the gate. He has a ledger open, a reed pen damp with ink, box of seals, a set of weights that know how much metal should feel like. He reads names and tallies loads, not to interrogate, but to keep the peace from forgetting itself. 2 bolts of silk, a jar of oil, 3 bags of pepper, 12 measures of wool, passed at third hour. Duty paid in coin and kindness. The entry dries, the day is recorded. The gate is memory with hinges. Some forts are called caravanserai, inns with walls, stables with order. Rooms whose floors keep a polite warmth long after fires go patient. In their long halls, lintels are carved just enough to remember good news, a harvest in a far valley, a bridge repaired, a winter that was merciful. Beds are platforms of wood and straw that do not pretend to be home and are honest about that. Niches in thick walls hold small lamps that make circles of amber where voices come to rest. Here, the road sits down and takes off its burdens. There is work even in rest. Packs are lowered and opened. Ropes, stiff from frost or grit, are rubbed with fat and coaxed back into flexibility. Hooves are checked. A thorn is teased from a pad. A strap is reholed with a heated awl. The leathers, small smoke spelling the alphabet of repair. A man sets a nail in a mule's shoe with slow taps, avoiding drama. Another combs a camel's coat and finds a burr that must have traveled 50 miles to get here. A boy runs errands with a pride that keeps him warm. Fill the bucket, fetch the charcoal, carry a letter to doors down to the guard who can read it at a glance. On the tar top, the view is instruction. Ridges march away like paragraphs. Ravines gather shadow the way ledgers gather numbers. Far below, a bridge rope or stone sways and steadies in the wind. A ribbon of pale water threads a valley floor, sewn into place by dark willows. The watchman points to a notch in the ridge and names its weather. Cloud from the east means frost by dawn. Cloud from the west means a gentler day. He points to an apron of scree and names its appetite. Snowmelt will loosen it, bring the caravan through in a whisper. He points to a fold where bushes cling and says, "Ibex like it there, wolves do too, keep your dogs close." Such lessons do not appear on maps. They appear in the mouth, in the hand, in the habit of looking, far and then near and then at your feet again. Signals move more quickly than caravans. On clear nights, a lamp is lifted thrice and answered from the next tower, a little constellation trained to pass along a message, all calm, road open, or, if needed, the more urgent rhythm that means delay. Snow on the pass. By day, a cloth, the color of wheat means one thing, a cloth the color of charcoal another. Few bandits approach a road that talks to itself along the ridge. Those who do are met not only by spears, but by an arithmetic of doors closing ahead of them, gates opening behind them, footsteps collecting quietly until they think better of their plans. When storms arrive, the fort becomes an instrument designed for weather. Doors are barred, shutters latched, animals drawn closer to the inner walls. Wine finds every corner and learns it cannot move the stone. Snow slants across the courtyard and then gives up, settling into neat drifts that the morning will tidy. Inside, the kettle steams, dampening the air just enough to remind lungs of valley mornings. People sit nearer, voices lowering without being told. Cards appear, a carved board with a race played by pebbles kills an hour elegantly. A story about a winter 30 years ago proves that winters have always behaved. The storm beats time on the gate. Inside, someone mends a strap and hums a tune that does not mind being interrupted. Between forts, watchhouses stand like commas in the mountain's long sentence. Some are no larger than a room with a view, a cot, a shelf for lamp and ledger, a hook for a cloak, a rack for a spear. A single guard keeps company with the weather and the stone, counting caravans, noting the hour mule braid twice for no reason, writing down small truths that become large safety when collected. He will be relieved tomorrow by a man who will smile at the neatness of the notes and add his own a chain of attention that can survive many winters. Beneath all this, the path itself is labor. Where a cliff refuses, a ledge is carved. Where a stream insists on crossing, a stepping stone ford is set with stones that won't quarrel with the current. A rope bridge hums in the wind, its planks set close enough for camels to believe in it, its handlines knotted where hands will need courage in a narrow place. The trail is widened by a dozen mornings of quiet work, baskets of rubble tipped, tamped, persuaded into becoming ground. No one applauds. Applause is for victory, and this is maintenance more important. Animals change their character with the altitude. On the high reaches, yaks appear from villages that bind the sky to the earth with wool and habit. Their breath steams, their shoulders rock like boats in slow water. They look unhurried and are. Mules find their balance where no human kneecap would dare. Horses step like scribes, precise, neat, unwilling to spill. Camels look bemused by stone but proceed all the same, each foot putting itself down as if signing a careful name. Drivers murmur to them in languages the animals do not care about and tones they do. Trust is the only halter that never frays. Between a fort and the next, a hermit shrine or small cave with painted walls sometimes offers silence within silence. A statue whose face has softened with candle smoke looks out at a road that never finishes. An H holds a bowl where travelers leave a coin or a date or a sprig of herb as acknowledgement that the mountain has its own citizens. No grand theology is needed, only gratitude, which is theological enough. Customs at the gate are practical courtesies set to paper. A toll is a handful of coins, a measure of salt. A promise of labor. On the path comes summer. The scribe writes the receipt in a calm hand, repeats it aloud for those who cannot read, presses a small seal into clay that will dry on a string, and pass the caravan through 2 more gates without pause. In a chest in a cool room, such seals collect like small moons, proof that cooperation traverses stone more easily than defiance does. When a quarrel arises, a load unbalanced, a claim of weight disputed, the scale is fetched, the stone weight placed, the beam made level, and both parties watch the law of gravity decide for them. The fort keeps mat, though no one here calls it that. Balance is balance in any language. Evenings in these high places are particular. The sun goes early, climbing the opposite wall of the valley into a sky that looks dangerously thin and harmless. In its absence, color intensifies. The blue of shadow deepens to ink. The red of a blanket thrown over a load glows like a coal. The yellow of a lamp wick becomes a small sun, a hand's width across. Someone plucks a string instrument, not to impress, but to persuade sleep to recognize the room. A child there is always a child somewhere, balances on a low wall until a parent's hand closes the air on them and changes the evening's plot to something safer. Laughter happens, short and kindly, as if to give the cliffs something new to echo. When the dawn returns, it does so by degrees measurable in breadth. First the ridge wears a line of pale iron, then the parapets blush, then the courtyard pebbles wake. Then steam from the first kettle draws a straight line up into a sky now willing to be blue again. Men check the path with a glance that sums up 1,000 details in one motion. Women tie headcloths and fold blankets with the efficiency that makes wean life look elegant. The scribe rolls yesterday's ledger closed, ties it, sets a fresh page where it will not have to look for one. The gate opens with a respectful complaint. The caravan gathers itself like a polite argument and re-enters the vast room of stone. No fort can promise that nothing will happen on the road. Snow will arrive early one year, rockfall will surprise a corner, a bridge will sulk, a beast will stumble. A man will hear the mountain speak to his fear and have to be reminded to look only at the next step. But together the towers, the ledgers, the lamps, the sealed strings, the patched straps, The shared broth, the watchman's practiced gaze, the mountain road learns to behave. It becomes not a threat, but a test, not a mystery, but a discipline, not an enemy, but a partner that insists on respect and rewards it with passage. By the time the caravan wends away from the last fort on a long descent toward another climate, it carries more than goods. It carries a way of walking, measured, attentive, considerate. The road has taught what the desert began, that endurance is not hardness but steadiness, that safety is not the absence of danger but the presence of care, that gates, when they are wise, keep out only fear and let everything else pass. Tonight, somewhere high and cold, a lamp on a tower will blink 3 times and be answered from far away. A guard will make a note, a dog will turn twice and put its nose under its tail. The mountain will not move, the stars will, in the courtyard below. A kettle will whisper until someone remembers to pour, and the gate will sleep standing up, like a good sentinel. Past the forts, where walls withdraw and gates stand empty against sky, the Silk Road narrows once again into paths where the mountains themselves are the only guardians. Here, safety depends not on stone walls or scribes with ledgers, but on attention, balance, and the memory of those who walked before. To travel these highways was to practice courage without noise, to cross rope bridges in silence, to lead beasts along cliffs with steady hands, to hear avalanches in distant valleys, and step carefully as though one's footsteps could speak to snow. The bridges are the most fragile and most enduring features of the mountain road. From afar, they look like lines drawn by a careful child between 2 cliffs, rope braided from yak hair, wooden planks fastened with knots, stone anchors sunk into the rock. These simple tools carried caravans across gorges to deep to measure. With eyes, a caravan leader steps first, holding his staff like a prayer. The bridge hums with the weight of his steps, the ropes creaking, the wind pulling sideways. Camels hesitate, their eyes wide, but they follow when led, their packs swaying gently. The sound is one of woven rope and patient courage. No words are spoken, the crossing is its own language, made of trust in knots, wood, and the mountain's grudging permission. On the other side, the valleys open, narrow at first, with walls rising like bookshelves. They widen into shelves of green. Streams tumble over rocks, their water clear and cold, carrying the taste of snow. Villages cling to terraces cut into slopes, houses built from stone and timber, smoke rising from low chimneys, goats climbing paths, as if they were written just for them. Here, the Silk Road is not only a line of trade but a vein of life. Barley grows in patches where soil is deep enough, apricot trees bloom in spring, fields are small but stubborn. For these mountain people, the caravan is a guest and a wonder, living river that flows without water. Hospitality here is plain but generous. A family invites a trader into their home, sets before him bowls of buttered tea, bread dense with barley, a handful of dried fruit. Payment is not demanded, though gifts are exchanged. In return, the trader tells of deserts where sand sings, of cities where towers shine with glazed tile, of seas wider than valleys. Children listen with mouths open, their eyes tracing camels outside as though they were creatures from legend. The Silk Road carries goods, yes, but also stories, each told in small rooms where lamps glow against stone walls. Bandits once hunted these paths too, waiting in narrow defiles where echoes hide footsteps. Yet even they respected the road in a strange way. To rob a caravan was dangerous. Word traveled as quickly as goods. Forts closed gates. Other caravans armed themselves. Passes grew unfriendly. The mountain could be cruel, but cruelty rarely lasted. It was too heavy to carry far. More often, protection was found in community. Villagers warning travelers of a storm. Guides leading the way through a treacherous pass. Strangers walking together because the mountain allowed no one to be truly alone. Nights in the high passes are colder than any desert evening. Fires crackle, their warmth huddled close to the body, their light pressed against the dark as though in negotiation. Stars sharpen here, clearer than in the lowlands. So near it feels as though one could stretch a hand and tilt them. The Milky Way spills across the sky, mirrored faintly in streams frozen mid-fall. The caravan sleeps wrapped in cloaks, faces turned toward flames, animals resting in a ring for warmth. The mountain hums softly, the groan of ice shifting, the call of owls. The wind threading through valleys. Sleep comes slowly but deeply, as though the stone itself has lent its wake to dreams. By dawn, frost lies white across saddles, ropes stiff with cold. Breath rising in clouds from camels and men alike. Fires are coaxed back to life, kettles set to boil, bread warmed on flat stones. Travelers rise stiff but steady, repacking loads, tightening knots, checking hooves. The road awaits, not cruel, not kind, simply itself. It does not shorten for haste, nor lengthen for fear. It allows passage only in patience. The mountain segments of the Silk Road were not about conquest, but about entrance. They taught lessons as valuable as any silk or spice, that balance is stronger than force, that silence can be more protective than walls, that bridges made of rope endure not because they are unbreakable, but because people cross them with respect. Each step, each crossing, each night beneath stars was a thread added to the fabric of memory, a reminder that the road was not a single line, but a shared act of faith stretched across deserts, rivers, and mountains alike. Along the Silk Road, goods were wrapped in cloth, sealed in jars, tied in bundles. They traveled patiently, bolts of silk from the east, spices from the tropics, glass and gold from the west. Yet more fragile and more enduring than any of these were the stories. They had no weight, needed no pack animal, and yet they crossed deserts, climbed mountains, slipped through gates, and found their way into markets and hearths. They were carried not in saddlebags but in voices, and passed not with coin but with time. A caravan in the evening hush is where stories come alive. Fires are lit, their glow small but steady against the vastness of night. The smell of boiling tea mingles with smoke, bread crackles on hot stones, camels shift and sigh, their shadows long and soft are on the flames. Traders sit, not bargaining now but resting. Some stretch their legs, some cradle cups, some lean back and watch sparks vanish into the sky. The day's silence loosens, and words begin to walk. One man speaks of a sea so wide that stars alone guide its crossing. His hands trace waves in the air, his voice carries the salt of memory. Few in the circle have seen such a sea, but they listen, imagining ships with red sails, carrying pepper and pearls. Another tells of a city of blue tiles, where domes shimmer like pieces of sky fallen to earth. He describes gates high enough to swallow a caravan whole, markets where even the spices are weighed on golden scales. The listers smile, half doubting, half dreaming, but all content. Stories shift like wind. Some are legends, heavy with gods and heroes. A Persian guard might tell of Rostam, the giant warrior, his battles painted on the night. A Chinese trader may recite lines of poetry about dragons who rise with clouds. Others are fables, short and sharp, where foxes outwit lions, where birds bring luck, where a child's kindness saves a village. And some are rumors, whispered as though the dark itself is listening, of empires rising beyond mountains, of kings demanding tribute, of new roads cut by armies. Language is no obstacle. A story told in Persian may be retold in Turkic, reshaped in Arabic, softened in Chinese. Each tongue changes it slightly, like silk dyed in a new vat, but the pattern remains. A child in a village may grow up hearing a tale first told by a sailor, thousands of miles away, reshaped by dozens of mouths before reaching their ears. Stories are the road's most faithful travelers. They are never lost, only transformed. In markets, too, stories mingle with goods. A merchant displays silk but sells it with a tale. This cloth was woven in Chang'an, in a hall where even they are shown with thread. A man selling horses speaks of herds that gallop free across steppes, faster than the wind. Spice sellers let their baskets speak of lands where rain falls in abundance, where jungles hum with unseen voices. Buyers pay not only for the goods, but for the journeys that brought them. Stories also carry warnings. A caravan leader tells of a storm that closed a pass for 3 weeks. Another of a well gone dry in a desert stretch. These tales are not entertainment, but survival. To hear them is to inherit maps written not on paper but in memory. One who listens well may avoid thirst, snow, or danger. In this way, the road remembers itself, teaching each new traveler what silence alone cannot. And yet not all stories are grand. Some are personal, a father telling of his child's first step, a woman describing her village's spring festival, a boy speaking of the goat he misses at home. These are the smallest stories, but they travel far, nestled in pauses, shared with strangers who may forget the words but remember the warmth. Even when silk frays and spices lose scent, the memory of a story told by fire lingers. At night, when silence returns, the stories remain in the air, unhurried, invisible, waiting to walk again. They weave themselves into dreams, into the creak of rope, into the sigh of camels. In the morning, when the caravan rises, they pack themselves silently into memory, ready to be unpacked at the next fire, in the next town for the next pair of listening ears. The Silk Road is often drawn as lines on a map stretching east to west, but in truth, it was also drawn in words, 1,000 stories crossing deserts and mountains, carried on the breath of traders, guards, children, and strangers. It was a library without walls, a song without one singer, a road without end. By day, the Silk Road appeared as a line of beasts and people stretching across dust, stone, and shadow. By night, by firelight, it revealed itself as something else entirely, a library without walls, built not of papyrus or parchment, but of voices and memory. What moved along the path were not only bolts of silk and sacks of pepper, but the words that filled the long spaces between footsteps. Picture a fire flickering low, its glow painted on the faces of travelers. The air smells of smoke, faint spice, wool, and the sharp sweetness of tea. Camels chew rhythmically nearby, their shadows stretching across the sand. Against this quiet backdrop, a merchant begins to speak, not loudly, but with the steady rhythm of someone unspooling a thread. His story is of a kingdom by the sea, where palaces shine like mirrors, and fish with silver scales leap into boats. Unasked, a listener smiles faintly, knowing such things are unlikely, but he remembers the image, tucks it into his mind, and perhaps repeats it later with his own embellishments. Thus the road lengthens not only in miles, but in memory. Stories along the Silk Road behaved like silk itself, woven, dyed, carried, cut, and rewoven. A tale of a hero slaying a dragon in one valley might appear 300 miles later with the dragon transformed into a leopard, then again with the hero changed into a woman, then again where no beast remains at all. Only a wise riddle asked and answered. Truth was less important than endurance. If a story was remembered, it was alive, and if alive, it could travel. At caravanserai stone inns along the route, this exchange grew richer still. Imagine a long hall, lamps hanging from beams, smoke darkening the ceiling. Merchants sit shoulder to shoulder, guards leaning their spears against the wall, scribes with ink-stained fingers listening as eagerly as children. Here a Persian traveler tells of gardens where water flows in channels carved like poetry, where roses bloom in colors that shame cloth. There, a Chinese poet recites verses about cranes flying across the moon, words so soft the hall itself seems to lean closer. A Turkic horseman offers a fable of a fox and a wolf, the lesson sharp but delivered with humor. And from the far west, a Byzantine trader speaks of cities where domes gleam like rising suns. None of the listeners may ever see these places, but all will carry them onward, folded into the fabric of the road. It was not only tales of far-off lands. The Silk Road's library also stored warnings and wisdom. A guard recounted how bandits once disguised themselves as monks, offering prayers before striking. From then on, travelers listened for sincerity in voices as carefully as they watched for footprints in sand. A shepherd described the way snow cracked beneath his feet just before an avalanche, teaching others to recognize the sound of danger. Such knowledge, passed mouth to mouth, saved lives as surely as water or bread. And there were songs, as valuable as maps, some were lullabies sung to restless children, their melodies simple. Their words about goats, rivers, or stars. Others were chants to keep walking in rhythm, beats that matched the step of camels and the sway of burdens. A song might travel hundreds of miles, its tune unchanged but its words reshaped, until what was once a lullaby became a march, and then a prayer, and then a festival song in a city square. Music, like silk, never stayed where it began. In this way, the Silk Road did not only connect markets, it connected imaginations. A woman in Samarkand might tell her granddaughter a story of a serpent from India. A man in Chang'an might hum a tune that first rose on the banks of the Euphrates. A shepherd in the Pamirs might pass along a proverb first spoken by a fisherman on the Mediterranean. None of them knew the full journey of their words, yet each played a part in carrying them. And so the road became a library that could never burn because it was not written on paper but on memory. It grew with every caravan, expanding without shelves, stretching without limits. Its catalogue was endless: fables and proverbs, songs and rumors, prayers and riddles, histories half remembered, and dreams half believed. To sit by a fire on the Silk Road was to open a book without covers, to turn pages written by tongues instead of pens, to step into a story carried as softly as a footprint on dust. When silence returned, it was not empty. It was full of voices just spoken, lingering, like smoke above embers. Travelers lay down, cloaks drawn close, eyes closing while minds replayed what they had heard. Some smiled, some sighed, some whispered a line into sleep. The stars above watched, unwriting nothing, letting every word drift freely, carried forward on the breath of those who would rise tomorrow and walk again. The caravans carried more than cloth and coin. They carried memory, and memory shaped into stories could travel farther than any pack animal, last longer than any empire. By the time a tale had crossed deserts and mountains, it was no longer owned by one people but by all who had told it. In this way, the Silk Road itself became less a path of stone and sand than a path of words, a moving current of imagination. Picture a caravan halted at dusk, its fire a small glow in a valley. A trader sets down his cup, and with a smile that suggests both fatigue and pleasure begins to tell of Alexander the Great, how he rode across deserts, how he faced impossible battles. Round the fire some nod, recognizing the name. Others add their own versions. Perhaps Alexander became Iskander, a hero who built walls against monsters. Perhaps he became a figure in Persian tales, part king, part wanderer. In the morning, that story, reshaped, will leave with another caravan. It will cross another pass, join another fire, find another tongue. Slowly, over centuries, it will enter the libraries of many nations, not as history, but as shared legend. In another camp, someone recites a Buddhist sutra, learned from a monk along the road. His accent is different, his memory imperfect, but the words themselves are like water poured from one vessel to another, changed in shape, unchanged in essence. Listeners close their eyes, not needing to understand every syllable. The cadence alone soothes. Later, perhaps, one will carry fragments of the chant home, repeating them not as religion but as song. The sutra has traveled further than any manuscript. There were also parables of merchants, lessons disguised as tales. One described the man who tried to carry too much gold across a desert, and whose camels grew weary and collapsed. The moral was clear. Greed walks more slowly than patience. Another told of a trader who gave away a sack of dates to a starving family, and later found tenfold kindness when he himself was stranded. These stories taught what the road demanded: fairness, generosity, and the humility to know that no one survives alone. And then there were tales that grew into myths. A story of a mountain spirit told in one valley might be rattled 100 miles away as a dragon, and farther still as a giant bird with wings wide enough to shadow villages. A whisper about a city of glass could spread and become legend, inspiring caravans to search for it. Sometimes stories outlasted even the towns where they began. Ruins might fall into dust, but the tales told there kept traveling, carrying the memory of vanished walls. What makes these stories powerful is not only their endurance, but their gentleness. They were told without books, without ink, without monuments. They existed only in the air, in the pauses between footsteps, in the sigh before sleep. Yet they survived because people wanted them to, because a guard at a gate, a mother in a market, a boy leading a camel, all chose to repeat them. A single story could become a bridge where languages met, where strangers became kin for a moment. The Silk Road, then, was not simply a line traced on earth. It was a road built of words, carried across generations. The same fire that warmed hands also warmed stories. The same stars that guided footsteps also guided memory. Goods might arrive faded, spices lose their scent, coins melt and be recast, but a story could arrive as fresh as when it was first spoken, and once told, it could never truly die. When caravans moved on, they left behind no written record of their voices. Yet in markets, in villages, in homes, their stories lingered. A proverb about patience, a fable about generosity, a legend of distant kings, all these became invisible threads woven into the cultures of the road. Even now, echoes of those tales survive, folded into folklore from the Mediterranean to the Pacific. The road carried silk. Yes, it carried jade, glass, pepper, and porcelain. But most of all, it carried human imagination, unbound by borders, stronger than stone, softer than breath. And in the silence of night, when flames sank low and stars watched patiently, those stories were as real as the road itself. Roads made of words, guiding footsteps, as surely as any map. Maps today draw the Silk Road as tidy lines, arrows sweeping east to west, labeled with cities and goods. But to those who walked it, the road was not a line. It was a memory, living and fragile, kept alive in footsteps, in voices, in wells and walls that whispered of those who passed before. Each journey left traces that were not carved in stone but written into people, into the land itself. The Silk Road, in truth, was a path of remembering. In the desert, memory was in the wells. A traveler would approach a cluster of palms, a hollow in the ground lined with stones, and remember, here my grandfather drew water. Here my father tied the camels. Here, when I was a boy, I learned the taste of cool water after days of dust. The well was more than a source of life. It was a point in the road's mind, a page in its unwritten book. To pass it was to feel continuity, not only of trade, but of being. In the mountains, memory was in the forts and passes, stones blackened by torches, grooves worn by cartwheels, carvings of names in hidden corners. These told travelers that they were not the first. Each fort held the ghosts of other caravans, guards who once walked the walls, scribes who once tallied coins, merchants who once warmed their hands by the fire. Even in abandonment, the fort remembered. A cracked wall was a reminder of snowstorms survived. A broken gate told of danger repelled. To rest there was to feel that one's own journey was only a verse at a song centuries long. Markets, too, remembered. A stallholder in a crossroads town might sell bolts of silk without knowing the names of the first traders who brought them. But the smell of cinnamon, the gleam of porcelain, the sparkle of glass beads, these were all memories of distant lands. A child watching a caravan arrive in her town carried that image into adulthood, and perhaps told her own children, "When I was small, I saw camels taller than men, carrying cloth that shone like water, even when the goods themselves were gone. The memory of them stayed like fragrance lingering after the spice is eaten." The road also remembered through ruins. Sometimes a traveler would pass a village now silent, its wells dry, its walls collapsed, yet the road still curved toward it, as though unwilling to forget. In the ruins, a fragment of painted wall, a shard of pottery, a faint inscription left by some forgotten hand. All these whispered that life had been here, that stories had once stopped to rest. To walk past was to feel accompanied by invisible travelers, those whose names were lost but whose presence still brushed the air. Memory was not only in places, it was in people. A caravan leader carried the stories of every road he had walked, where a spring could be trusted, where snow fell early, where a certain innkeeper was fair, where a band of thieves once struck. His knowledge was not written, but spoken, repeated by apprentices, passed like a flame from torch to torch. A scribe remembered debts and bargains. A guard remembered scars and the lessons behind them. A singer remembered tunes taught by strangers. In markets far away, each memory was a thread, and together they wove the fabric of the road. At night, when fires burned low, travelers sometimes spoke softly, not of trade or danger, but of home. A man described the orchard where his children played, another the temple where prayers still rose each morning, another the valley where the river bent just so. These personal memories became part of the Silk Road too, for they were carried alongside goods, folded into bundles, pressed into jars, hidden in saddlebags. Every bolt of silk carried not only color and sheen, but the image of the weaver who worked by lamplight. Every spice carried not only fragrance, but the soil where it first grew. The road was lined with memories as surely as it was with dunes and stones. To walk the Silk Road was, in a sense, to walk inside memory, one's own, and that of countless others. Each step recalled another, each voice echoed voices long past. Goods might change hands, cities might rise and fall, empires might redraw their borders, but the road remembered, and so long as people kept walking, the memory endured. Even now ruins stand where caravans once passed, wells still hold water, market squares remain under modern names, and if one listens, one can still hear the faint murmur of traders bargaining, the jingling of camel bells, the sigh of a story told by firelight. The Silk Road has not vanished. It lives in the memory of places, of people, of words that will not fade. It is less a road of stone than a road of remembrance, and every traveler who ever set foot upon it became part of its long, quiet memory. The Silk Road was never fixed in stone like the walls of palaces. It was softer, more fragile, yet in that fragility lay its endurance. For what survived was not just bricks and towers, but echoes, carried in places, in voices, in dust that remembered every footprint. If the desert erased tracks overnight, still the road recalled them in other ways. Consider the stones that lined caravan paths. Each ridge polished by countless hooves became a kind of memory, smooth grooves worn into. Thresholds of caravanserai still tell of where camels knelt, their burdens heavy with silk and porcelain. Stones blackened by ancient fires carry the scent of smoke long gone, as if holding fast to evenings when merchants sat shoulder to shoulder, trading not only goods but laughter. Even collapsed walls whisper their past, cracks shaped by frost and storms, niches where lamps once glowed. The Silk Road was built from such stones of remembrance, humble but eloquent. Memory also lived in names. Towns changed hands, empires rose and fell, yet the names of wells, passes, and markets remain. The Three Palms, the Gate of Winds, the Valley of Echoes. Such names outlasted the rulers who taxed them. To speak these names aloud was to call upon centuries of footsteps. A caravan leader might reassure his companions, "We will reach the Gate of Winds by nightfall." Though the men around him had never seen it before, The name itself steadied them, the road remembered for them. Then there were the inscriptions. In caves along the mountains, travelers carved short messages. A name, a prayer, a blessing. Some were simple. Abdul passed here in the year of the locust. Others were hopeful. May the road be kind to my son. A few were proud. Merchant of Samarkand brought silk and jade. To run one's fingers over such carvings was to touch memory directly, to know that someone long gone had stood in the same place, looked at the same mountains, felt the same mixture of fatigue and wonder. The road also remembered through song. A simple melody hummed by a guard might become a work chant, then a prayer, then a lullaby for children far away. Each repetition carried something of the road. Even without instruments, voices kept rhythm with footsteps, drums of flesh and breath echoing across dunes and valleys. Centuries later, fragments of these tunes still lived in folk songs, their origins forgotten but their spirit intact. Music was memory given wings. The markets were perhaps the richest vessels of memory. A trader did not need scrolls to recall the worth of silk or spice. He carried prices in his mind, comparing them to deals struck years before. A stall itself might remember the same family selling dates in the same square for generations, each child inheriting not only the stall but the rhythm of bargaining, the cadence of welcome, the art of smiling just enough. In this way, markets preserved not only goods but gestures, a choreography of exchange handed down like an heirloom. But most of all, the Silk Road remembered through voices. Words carried further than caravans, further even than silk. A tale of a storm in one desert would be recalled by fireside 1,000 miles away. A proverb coined in one valley would live on in another tongue. Each voice became part of the road's memory, weaving threads of continuity. Even strangers, sharing tea for the first time, felt part of something larger, an endless conversation, stretching backward to forgotten ancestors and forward to listeners not yet born. At night, when fires dimmed and only stars watched, the sense of memory was strongest. Travelers lay down, heads resting on folded cloaks, and felt themselves part of an ancient rhythm. The sand might erase their footprints by morning, but the road itself would not forget. It stored each journey not in maps or ledgers alone, but in the way names lingered, stones darkened, songs carried, voices rattled. The Silk Road was not just a road, it was remembrance itself, a corridor where the past walked beside the present, where every step was both new and ancient. To travel it was to enter a living memory, one that needed no monument, for it lived in people, in places, and in the quiet echo of footsteps fading into dust. When the last caravan leaves and the dust of hooves settles, what is left of the Silk Road? Not always walls, for they crumble, not always goods, for they decay. What remains, most deeply, is memory woven into the land, the ruins, and the hearts of people who keep telling its stories. The road is not gone. Even now it lingers in ways both subtle and clear, whispering to those who pause long enough to listen. In some places, ruins still stand, caravanserai with roofless halls, their walls rising like solemn guardians against wind. A traveler today might step through a broken arch and hear echoes of voices, traders bargaining softly, animals snorting, children laughing. Stones cracked by centuries of frost still hold the shape of doorways where silk bundles once passed. Even if the names of the builders are forgotten, their work endures as memory carved into the earth itself. Other memories lie in roads that remain faint but traceable. Across steppes, faint tracks curve where caravans once marched, grass still refusing to grow fully where hooves pressed for centuries. In mountains, steps cut into rock still lead upward, worn smooth by countless feet. In deserts, the road is harder to see, erased by shifting dunes, but here, too, memory persists in the names of wells, in the stories villagers tell of how their ancestors guided caravans to water. The earth itself remembers, though softly, like breath on glass. Peoples along the route carry memory most vividly. In Central Asian towns, Families still weave cloth with patterns that echo those carried west on camel backs. In Persian markets, spices are still sold in heaps of color and fragrance, as they were when caravans paused to trade. In China, silk remains a thread of identity, its shimmer unchanged despite the centuries. The road is gone only as a physical line, as a cultural memory. It thrives, even in distant lands. Echoes remain. A glass bead found in a Scandinavian grave. A piece of Chinese porcelain unearthed in the sands of Arabia. A coin minted in Byzantium discovered in a Central Asian field. Each is a fragment of memory, proof that the road did not vanish but scattered itself into the corners of the world. Archaeologists read these fragments like senses, piecing together a story already written in memory long before. And yet, the truest memory of the Silk Road may be found in human imagination. Legends of caravans still appear in folk tales. Their bells ringing faintly in lullabies. Proverbs born of the road still circulate. The desert has patience longer than man. A road shared is a burden halved. The farthest journey begins with a single step. These are not just sayings. They are the voice of the road, remembered even where the caravans no longer pass. At night, if one sits quietly in a valley once crossed by traders, the silence feels full. The wind whistles through stones, owls call from cliffs, stars shine, as they always did. The listener may feel faintly as though the road itself is remembering caravans still walking in ghostly procession, fires glowing where no embers burn, voices drifting across time. Memory does not vanish when bodies leave. It settles into the air, waiting to be heard. The Silk Road is often thought of as history, closed and finished. But in truth, it is a memory still alive in ruins, in songs, in artifacts, in traditions, in names, and in the very dust that once rose beneath the hooves of camels. What remains when caravans are gone is not silence, but remembrance, carried forward by people who still dream of connections across deserts and mountains. The road as memory teaches us that nothing is ever truly lost. Paths may fade, walls may fall, but the essence of what once moved here remains. Every trade, every story, every song and proverb has become part of the larger memory of humanity. The Silk Road is not only a road of the past, it is a road of memory, still walked today by all who recall, all who listen, all who tell its story again. The Silk Road has often been imagined as a grand artery of empires, as if it were drawn in bold strokes across maps, connecting kings and palaces, armies and treasuries. But in truth, it was gentler than that. It was not only a highway of commerce, it was a whispering corridor of patience carried forward by footsteps, camel bells, and voices that moved steadily across deserts, mountains, and valleys. What made the Silk Road endure was not its walls or forts, not even the goods it carried, but the human rhythm it sustained. Walk, rest, share water, tell stories, trust the stars, move on. The desert taught patience, the mountains taught caution, the markets taught fellowship, and the road itself taught endurance. It was not a place of haste but of slow survival, where every sip of water, every measure of spice, every word spoken at firelight mattered. Even now, though caravans no longer stretch in long lines across the sands, the memory of the road remains. It lingers in the ruins of caravanserai, in wells that still give water, and songs whose origins are forgotten but whose melodies still soothe. It hides in porcelain fragments found far from their birthplace, in coins unearthed in fields that never minted them, in proverbs that remind us of patience and generosity. The Silk Road is still here in quiet echoes, in patient landscapes, in the shared imagination of peoples who may never meet but who are joined by threads spun centuries ago. To listen to its story is to hear not the noise of conquest but the softness of survival. Not the cry of battles, but the murmur of markets. Not the roar of armies, but the sigh of footsteps fading into dust. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself walking with that caravan. The bells are faint, the fire is warm, The stars above are endless. Round you are strangers who feel like kin, bound not by blood but by the shared road. Goods are wrapped and ready. Stories rise like sparks into the night, and silence stretches kindly in every direction. The Silk Road does not end, it only pauses, waiting quietly for the next dreamer, the next traveler, the next listener. And perhaps, as your eyes close and your breathing slows, you will walk it too in dreams where the sands remember, the mountains keep watch, and the stars guide you gently on your way. What if a road was more than a path on the map? What if it was a thread of memory, weaving together deserts, mountains, and people who would never meet, but still shared the same stars? The Silk Road was such a thread, quiet, steady, and patient. It carried not only silk and spices, but footsteps, stories, and dreams that traveled farther than any caravan. Tonight, we'll walk that road together, not in haste, not in noise, but in the slow rhythm of camels, the hush of mountain winds, and the soft murmur of markets at dusk. Let the bells of the caravan and the glow of the fire guide you gently toward rest. And before we begin, a small invitation. If these quiet journeys through history help you find peace, please subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. It lets the algorithm know you'd like more nights like this, and it helps keep this road open for all who seek a gentler way to fall asleep. Now, breathe deeply, set your thoughts down like burdens at the gate, and join the caravan. The Silk Road is waiting, and it moves at the pace of dreams.